The Last Blitzkrieg, a book review of a novel by Walter Freeman, which was based on a screenplay by Lou Morheim, published in January 1959 by Signet Books. The back cover synopsis goes as follows. Boar from within, dress like American soldiers, talk like American soldiers, act like American soldiers, but kill for Germany. These were Der Fuhrer's orders to 150 Nazi commandos planted behind American lines to sabotage communications in Germany's last desperate bid for victory in World War II. The Last Blitzkrieg is the story of that daring operation of a German lieutenant who went too far. This novelization was based on the movie of the same name and released in 1959 by Columbia Pictures. The movie was produced by Sam Katzman and Arthur Dreyfuss directed Van Johnson, and it also starred, besides Van Johnson, Dick York, who many will remember as Darren Stevens from Bewitched, and Kerwin Matthews, along with Larry Storch, later of F Troop. A little more detail about the plot. This book, by the way, and movie were very well received in 1959. It was not all that long after the end of World War II, 14 years, and it was still in the minds of most of the people in the nation. So, anyways, let's take a little look at the plot. A fascinating plot is, actually. Several American GIs plan an escape from a German POW camp. Among them is German Lieutenant Hans von Kroner, known to them as Sergeant Richardson, who is working undercover spying on the prisoners and polishing up his American English. Reporting the escape plan to his camp commandant, Van Kroner is told that he is being removed from the camp as part of a top-secret project, gathering all fluent English-speaking members of the Wwii for an united, or unstated reason, Van Kroner is sent to a German castle with others for what is known as Operation Grief, where they will dress in American uniforms and spearhead the Ardennes offensive by committing sabotage, confusing enemy forces, and seizing key objectives for the attacking German forces. Assisting in the training, von Kroner is assigned to a team of three other men with various skills, including the Waffen, or I think that's how you say it, SS officer, Wiltz, who regales his comrades with stories of his exploits in terrorizing unfortunates, whilst a member of the Brown Shirts, not the British. Van Kroner's team's activities and the initial German assault met with success, but both soon run into unexpected difficulty. Von Kroner's forged orders are countermanded by a decimated American infantry company of the 23rd Infantry that forces them into being replacements, while the bad weather that made the German assault successful ends enabling American air power to attack the Germans. In their new unit, von Kroner meets his two fellow American prisoners, Sergeant Ludwig and Corporal Ennis, and they say they were the only survivors of their escape, as the Germans knew about it and then ambushed them. Obtaining plans for an American counterattack against the strategic crossroads, von Kroner warns the Germans by radio of the American attack, but is ordered to stay with the Americans to ensure that the attack indeed fails. Von Kroner's team sabotage a jeep with a bomb, killing the company commander, and an attempt to destroy the unit's other vehicle as weapons carrier, arousing Ludwig's suspicions. The company attacks a German position, with Willits using the opportunity to shoot their lieutenant in the back, placing Ludwig in command. Several German prisoners are taken, and Richardson, von Kroner, volunteers to take them to battalion headquarters. He returns to tell his comrades that the prisoners didn't want to escape. They wanted to surrender to the Americans, with von Kroner taking them in. A furious Willits insists that von Kroner should have shot the lot of them. With news of German infiltrators behind American lines spreading, Ludwig is further suspicious when Willits doesn't know what the American hotfoot is. Well, let's take a little bit of a review of the book and look at some interesting passages from it. This book, as I said earlier, came out about 14 years after the end of World War II, and of course, it was still fresh in people's minds. My dad, who served on the front lines in Italy, would have really liked this film, and may have. I was too young to remember if he had seen it at the time of release. The story is unique, coming from how the things would have been seen from the point of view of a German undercover agent. So it is quite interesting from that standpoint, a very good read. Let's look at a few interesting passages now from the book. And by the way, the copy in my collection is first edition, and it has been reissued. The opening paragraphs of Chapter 1 set up an interesting visual that make you want to read on. And I quote, "They strapped with their backs against to the sun. If you shot at them from the ground, you would have the blinding light in your eyes, and they could see you clearly. It was futile to shoot back as they came in. The best thing to do was to hit the dirt and pray that nothing hit you." The German army truck screeched to a halt, and Lieutenant Steiner didn't have time to order his prisoners into the ditch. They were there before he was. Steiner lay on his stomach, his head to the side. He tried to watch his prisoners and the planes too, but the planes were gone before he had time to decide upon how he was going to handle them and handle his men. The prisoners were singing the American Air Corps song. The planes were gone, and as suddenly as they had come. Dead quiet. Steiner hated quiet. Noise was what he loved. Drums throbbing with such urgency that the rhythm seemed part of one's blood. The drums at the party rally in Nuremberg. He wondered if he would ever hear them again after German victory. What a glorious celebration that was going to be. Steiner felt a trifle cold at that time. Goose pimples popped on his flesh. Russian troops were approaching the borders of East Prussia, and most of France was in the hands of the British and the Americans. The war could end unfavorably, Steiner thought, and then, feeling guilty and disloyal, he took consolation in the V-2 rockets that were knifing toward England. Goring had announced that every town in England would be flattened within a month, and the bombs could not hit America yet, but the Americans could not permit their British cousins to be destroyed. A peace would be signed. Germany would rule in Europe, take a breathing spell, and fight again. It was not so bad when you considered the entire picture, but you couldn't expect every single soldier to understand these things. If the Fuhrer could keep up the morale of the army, things would go well. End quote. The beginning of Chapter 2 continues to draw you into this really remarkable story. Let's take a look at a few paragraphs there. And I quote, "The guard with rifle slung over his shoulder and binoculars hung around his neck heard the first rasp from the loudspeaker. He knew what was coming. More reports of Allied defeats and Allied planes shot down. This was interesting. In the early days of the war, the radio talked about German victories. Now they spoke of Allied defeats. It seemed that they were enemy defeats without German victories. This was very strange," the guard braced himself. "The enemy has been stopped in his tracks on the ground. Thousands desert daily. The German army will be on the march again to a conclusive victory. The enemy will be smashed. The Americans will be rolled back into the sea. And the landing in France is being converted into another depot by the German army." Strange how they mentioned that battle, thought the guard. 300 American and British planes went down in flames over Cologne yesterday. That makes 2,500 enemy planes destroyed within a week. Allied propaganda, the guard thought. He was a butcher who wanted to get back to his wife, children, and the butcher shop that had sold no meat in 2 years. He stood atop his tower, and he looked down upon the American prisoners milling about below and wondered if they were confident of victory. It seemed as though they were. He had occasionally spoken to a German-speaking POW and invariably received the same reaction. They took an American victory for granted. America had never lost a war or won a peace. The guard wondered about this too. Perhaps Germany would rise again as she had done the last time. The guard quietly censured himself. He was thinking of the fatherland losing the war, and he had no right to do so. Men had been shot for less. End quote. I want to skip to the Chapter 19, the final chapter, as I don't want to reveal too much in case you hunt down a copy of this on Amazon and just decide to read it. So I want to quote to you from the first paragraph through 3 and read them for you. And I quote, "Richardson had a bad moment. He was panic-stricken. He could not let these men die. Ludwig must not die. To Richardson, Ludwig now represented something as important as his own life. Ludwig symbolized everything decent and honorable. He was the best of Germany to Richardson, even though he was an American soldier. Sergeant Ludwig was a powerful contradiction of the theory that any one race is all bad or good, that for that matter. Richardson could not let him die. Too much would die with him. The smooth mechanical clacks of the loading of the machine guns revealed the intentions of the captain to the Americans. They turned slowly, watching the gunner who waited for his orders, and Richardson struggled to think clearly. The gash on his cheek was hurting again, and he thought of the possibility of a serious infection, of being disfigured for life, but he thought too that life for him was not going to be for long unless he had unusual luck, and his luck was running out. End quote. And now I want to skip ahead a little more to a couple of the closing paragraphs just to give you a sense of how the book ended. And I quote, "The Americans had taken over 20 prisoners. Richardson stood up in spite of Ludwig's protest, and he spoke to the Germans as Ludwig supported him. Pain attacked his body through the wound in his side, his arm, his cheek, and his leg. All apparently superficial. He did not expect these wounds to put him out of action, but he sensed that he was on the verge of something important. He spoke to the prisoners in German. After speaking, he swayed and fell to the ground before Ludwig could catch him. A medic tested Richardson's pulse. Dead. Another dead Kraut. But this one was nuts, I guess. He was the sanest man I'd ever met, Ludwig said. What did he say to those Germans? He said that Hitler's dream is insane, and he told them that they had been doing the work of the devil, and that Germany, the Germany of war, was finished, and to go home and never say Heil again. Ludwig switched on a walkie-talkie. We've taken 512, held 512. He looked down at Richardson and a number of casualties to await further orders. So I hope you've enjoyed a look at or listen to this. The book is, again, I think it's a significant book when it comes to novelizations about World War II. So thanks for stopping by. Have a great evening, and God bless.